So no matter who you are or where you are in your spiritual journey, you are celebrated here. So thanks to Tim and his son. For those of you who are watching online, we're short our usual crew today. So I'm grateful for those of you who are watching and for those of you who are here. It's our custom to begin with silence. So if it's helpful to you to close your eyes, you can do that, and I will say some words. Just try to be here. Be aware that at the moment and always we reside in the heart of sacred mystery. And the work we do here is our intention, expresses our intention that sacred mystery find expression through who we are and how we live. So may grace be in our heads and in our thinking. May grace be in our eyes and in our seeing. May grace be in our ears and in our hearing. May grace be in my mouth and in my speaking. May grace be in our hearts and in our understanding. And may grace be at our ends and at our departing. May we draw closer to sacred mystery every step along the wayless way. And may we have the courage to walk it. And may the new life that we are given work on all that we are and all that we do, so that we can increasingly grow into the kind of people we are designed to be, and so that all creation can benefit from what we do here. Amen. As you know, if you've been attending these times lately, and if you haven't, I'm so glad you're here. We've been going through a narrative of the Jesus story, and my goal is twofold. One, I want to increase our religious literacy, and I want to show how a foundation of religious literacy is relevant for living the spiritual adventure that I'm calling walking the wayless way, which is a term I stole from the mystic Meister Eckhart. Now, if you think that religious literacy is not of importance, I would like for you to be aware that at the latest count, over 100 complaints from American military personnel have been received because commanders in our armed forces are telling people in the armed forces that the Iran war is part of God's plan. And to quote the complaint, the Iran war is part of God's plan, and that President Donald Trump was anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. Now, many evangelical and fundamental Christians believe that if the territory of Israel is expanded, then when that happens, that will be a signal for Armageddon to begin, and Jesus will come back down to the place from which he ascended, and we'll have something. Depending on your theological perspective, either 1,000 years of war or 1,000 years of peace. I don't think they've agreed which one. So there's a parable that's told in the New Testament, and it is a parable, that 40 days after the experience of resurrection, Jesus bodily ascended into heaven, and at Armageddon he will come back down. If the physical body of Jesus ascended into heaven, and if that physical body rose at the speed of light, Jesus would still be in our solar system. So I wonder what people are asking me to imagine when they imagine that Jesus is going to come back. If you take nothing else from this class today, I would like it to be this: Jesus is already here. He's here in the way that we relate to one another and to others and to the planet. So, we've been dealing with a phrase in the Lord's Prayer, and it's gotten us to this phrase: Thy will be done, thy kingdom come. What is the will of God? So we're going to camp out here for a while. So bring your tents, settle down. A phrase I love is bring a big bucket, because we've gathered at a very deep well. So the title that I have given this talk today is What Are the Odds? As you know, I love magic. And if you have ever seen many magicians perform, even somebody big like David Copperfield, they always do magic with decks of cards. Now, I'm sure everybody here, I assume, is familiar with the deck of cards. There are 4 suits: clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds, 13 cards in each suit, 10 number cards, 3 face cards, jacks, queens, and kings. The clubs and spades are black cards. The hearts and diamonds are red cards. Now, playing cards have really quite a history. They started in the Tang dynasty in China in 868. That's a long time ago. And playing cards traveled what is known as the Silk Road from China into the Arabic-speaking countries, and then into Europe. So when they got to the Arab-speaking countries, they had images on them of coins and animals. By the time they got to Spain, they had 4 suits: cups, swords, polo sticks, and coins. And by this time, there were 10 numbered cards and 3 face cards: king, deputy king, and second deputy. The first playing cards appeared in Spain in 1370. And just for your information, Spain produces the best card magicians in the world, not the U.S. The Orient is coming behind, and the reason for that is that the Spanish and the Oriental magicians take time to practice. And Western magicians, we have been absorbed in this push-button belief that it ought to be easy, and it isn't. The cards that we know that you're seeing on the screen actually developed in France. And that's where they began to have the suits that they have now and have the 2 colors that they have. And the reason this was important is it made producing them faster and cheaper. 2 colors, and to have a uniform agreement about them. The Joker was an American edition that was introduced in 1860. So the fact that there are 52 cards and 4 suits, 13 cards in each suit, isn't mystical. It just evolved over the way that people use cards to play games. Nonetheless, there are those who enjoy thinking that there's something mystical about cards. There are 52 cards, there are 52 weeks. There are 13 in each suit, 13 lunar cycles, 4 suits, 4 seasons, and on and on and on it goes. So here we are, centuries later, shuffling pieces of paper, symbols created in China, refined in Egypt, redesigned in France, renamed in America. Now, that's not just a deck of cards, that's globalization. Before we even knew what the word existed. I'm going to show you today a couple of things with cards. And the first thing I'm going to show you is the very first card trick that I learned. As a matter of fact, this card trick, I hate that word, it was in the first magic set I ever got, and it's probably still included in magic sets today. You can look it up when you go home. It's called the Princess Card Trick. And why it's known by this name, I have no idea. Okay. So I'm going to show you a slide that has 6 cards on it. And I'm going to ask you to think of one of them. Now, the best way to do this is to pick a card, focus on it, and say it to yourself 3 times. Okay? I'll give you a chance to do that right now. Get it firmly fixed in your mind, assuming everybody has one. Okay. Now, for the magic. I'm going to reach into your mind. Discover what card you picked, and I'm going to remove it from those cards. I'm a magician. Now I'm going to show you another one, not on the screen. But before I do, I want to share with you something about cards. If I were to take a deck of cards and shuffle them and say, here, pick one, which is the stupidest, dumbest, most boring way to do a card effect, you might think that I would have a 1 in 52 chance of knowing what card you selected. And in a way, that's true. But in another way, it is so far from the truth as to be inconceivable. Now, I know you have a tendency to be on the skeptical side. So when you go home, look this up and double check my facts here. But if you were to shuffle a deck of cards, the number of possible combinations is this number. Now, to put this in slightly more understandable ways, when you shuffle a deck of cards thoroughly, it is almost certain that that particular order of cards has never existed before in the history of the world. If you started shuffling a deck of cards at the time of the Big Bang, and you shuffled it once every second since then, you would still not have exhausted the possible combination of cards that can be produced. Isn't that amazing? What are the odds of that? What are the odds? What are the odds? I have 2 decks of cards here. They're both shuffled. I have a red deck and a blue deck. And I'm going to ask you if you would just pick one of them. That's all you have to do. Say red or blue. Red. You heard her. We're going to do the red ones. Michael Hart, would you come up here a minute? I'm going to ask you to stand over there until I need you. Come on. I want you to take these cards and don't let me touch them again. And you can go back over there. I'll call you back in a minute. You said red. Okay. No, I'm not going to turn water into wine. But I do have a deck of red cards. And they are all fairly shuffled, right? It's all mixed up in there. I'm going to put the deck of red cards in this wine glass. Okay? I'm still looking at you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a card from the red deck and put it in this wine glass like that. And another one like that. And when you say, I'm going to stop. Okay? Stop. Right now? On this card. Not this card. Not that card. This card. 8 of clubs. That's the card she stopped on. Michael, would you come over here a minute and take the blue deck of cards out? I don't want to touch them. I will take the box. Okay? They're all out. And I want you to hold them face down and count them face up into my hands until we come to the 8 of clubs, and everybody will remember the number, what it is. And we'll help you by counting out loud. Just one, turn it over, we'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51. Let's thank Michael for his help. 51. And that card was, the card that she stopped on was not in this deck. Now I want to review for you what has happened, because some of you at 3 o'clock in the morning are going to sit bolt upright in your bed and say, how the hell did that happen? What are the odds of that? I asked you, and you had no idea I was going to call on you, to pick a deck of cards. You had your choice. You said red. You could have said blue, but you said red. Then we gave the blue cards, which I did not touch, to Michael. Move one red card to here until you said stop. I could have stopped anywhere, but you control this. Now, how did that work? I'm going to tell you the secret, so you can do it at home. This morning, before I came to church, I took this blue deck of cards, and I took one card out, and I put it in the red deck. That's it. See, all these cards have red backs. And the very card that she stopped me on is the only card with a blue back. What are the odds of that? Yeah. That was the trick I promised if you would come. What is this? It's a miracle. It's so fun to do. What are the odds? I grew up in a part of the country where there was a phrase we used about future plans. It always seemed to me to be a very odd phrase to me. And frequently the response was, I'm having a party, I'm doing this, will you come? And frequently the answer was, yes, I'll be there, God willing, and the creeks don't rise. That always seemed odd to me because the creek seems more powerful than God's will. But that is our experience, isn't it? By the way, that phrase, God willing and the creek don't rise, is attributed to Benjamin Hawkins. Now, this is debated by some linguist scholars, but Benjamin Hawkins was appointed by George Washington as the General Superintendent of Indian Affairs. And he was summoned to Washington from his post in the South, and he sent a message back to George Washington saying that he would be there if there was not an uprising among the Creek Indians. So originally it was not about a creek of water. It was about a nation of people. That is your bonus language origin lesson for today. God's will doesn't seem to be a match for a statistical probability. So what if we gathered 100 people, which we have at least in this room, and agreed to watch these people for 1 month? And then they're not you, because this is an ordinary group of people. You're extraordinary. These are just regular coffee-drinking, password-forgetting, mildly sleep-deprived people. So what would happen? What are the odds of these people? And the numbers are sobering and beautiful. In 1 month, 1 or 2 of them would probably be involved in a car crash. Probably minor. We call them fender benders. No airbags deployed. But at least one person in this group would feel the sickening jolt, the sound of metal striking metal, and just for a moment, the fragility of life would be plain. One of them would sit in an emergency room from an accident, an injury, a fall, a kitchen mishap, a misjudged step off a curb. 15 to 25 of this 100 would catch a cold or some minor virus. Nothing dramatic, but enough to remind them that their bodies are not machines. One person would be hospitalized. Statistically, less than 1 would die. But over a year, in a group of 100 people, 1 person would not be here the next year. 1 would lose a job. 1 would begin a new one. Several would lie awake at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about money. 10 or 15 would feel real financial anxiety but never talk about it. 2 or 3 couples would have a serious argument, the kind that leaves silence hanging in the room afterward. 1 couple might quietly consider separating. And in that same room, someone else would unexpectedly fall in love. 1 person would become engaged. 1 person would become pregnant. 1 person would be a victim of nonviolent crime, identity theft, stolen package, fraud. And 1 would be quietly heroic in some unexpected, unseen way, caring for a sick spouse, a parent, forgiving an old wound, telling the truth when it costs something to do so. 5 or 6 would go through a period of genuine depression, and 1 might wrestle with despair so frightening that it's scary. And at least 1 person would experience something they would call life-changing. Now, over a lifetime, 1 in 100 people would develop cancer. One will be audited by the IRS, and we'll tell everyone about it for the next 15 years. So we think of our lives as singular stories, but statistically, we are walking probabilities. So the strange thing about statistics is they will tell us something is going to happen, but they never tell us to whom. So if you're in the room of 100 people, the numbers guarantee that somebody in that room will receive devastating news this month. But no one can say who. The statistics guarantee that someone will receive astonishing grace, but they cannot say for whom that door will open. Statistics flatten experience into percentages, but life refuses to stay flat. And the odds are mercilessly neutral. But here's what statistics cannot calculate: how much courage circulates in a room, how kindness multiplies, how one person's resilience strengthens another, how one act of mercy can ripple out beyond all actuarial tables. So if we truly believed in odds, we would walk more gently with each other. Because if one person in 100 will sit in an ER room this month, that means someone sitting beside you right now maybe is closer to that hallway than you know. If 25 in every 100 people are anxious, then 1/4 of this room is fighting an invisible battle. If somebody is facing losing a job, they're hiding it behind a composed face. I'm saying the odds should not make us paranoid. The odds should make us compassionate, because we are not just probabilities. We are fragile miracles walking around unaware of how statistically astonishing it is that we are here at all. This is not in my notes, but I remember after coming back from my experience doing the 10-day, I was sitting with my Buddhist friend, and he was asking me what my experience of the 10-day of silent meditation had been like. And I said to him, the only thing that comes to mind is to say, I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. And he said, well, it worked. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, we have a story in the Buddhist tradition about the turtle. Never heard this story. He said, well, there's a turtle that swims on the bottom of the ocean. Well, we don't know what ocean, because the turtle goes from ocean to ocean. And once every 1,000 years, this turtle comes up for a breath of air, and then goes back down. And suppose that you were on one of those oceans in a small boat, and you had a small brass ring, and on impulse, you just decided to toss it out into the ocean. And at that precise moment, the turtle comes up, and the ring goes around the turtle's head. Those are the odds of your being here in this incarnation, living the life that you are living. That's why you're filled with gratitude. And yet, here you are. What are the odds? The odds are low enough to inspire humility. They're high enough to demand compassion. They're certain enough to call forth courage. And they're mysterious enough to invite faith. Now, here's the interesting thing about what I've just shared with you. These odds are interesting. They're fun, as a matter of fact. as long as they're good, right? As long as they're held at arm's length. A certain number of people will get a cancer diagnosis the next year. That's interesting, unless it's you or your child or your partner, and then it's a different story. Why me? Now, most Americans, if you were to ask them, will say they believe in God or have some notion of God. And last week we taught about certain uncertainty. And we said that we don't know God. We cannot know God. Rather, we are invited into the cloud of unknowing. So that those who think they have all this figured out are like a ship that has come into a safe harbor. But my experience is that we are riding out on a stormy sea. Now, this doesn't mean we're lost. It doesn't mean we have no sense of direction. I believe that we are on a meaningful journey called the Wayless Way. And that belief contributes to my well-being. So before getting further into the aspect of the will of God that I'm attempting to teach today, I'd like to get a clear picture of the God that exists in most people's minds, perhaps even in yours. Even if you're a non-believer, you have to have some version of God not to believe in. So let's call this understanding of God the conventional God. So this conventional God exists above or outside of time. This God is male. This God knows everything. He knows everything that has happened, is happening, and will happen because he is, the old theological term for it is omniscient. He knows everything. This God is unaffected by what we do. This God never changes his mind, never alters course. And though he is described as a God of love, this God can't love because love responds. Now, if you think clearly about this definition of God, this God cannot respond to prayer, which is what we're talking about. Yet, at the same time, God is in control of things and has orchestrated history to a predetermined end. This means that this God causes or permits evil. Everything from the Holocaust to child abuse. God could have stopped it, but chose not to. This God is also pristine. By that I mean that this God, cannot stand to be in the presence of unholy creatures like you and me. We are, after all, dirty, rotten scoundrels. I don't mean you personally, but you know who I'm talking about. So to overcome this problem, the conventional God had to kill his son. And now this God sees us through this atoning lens, and this makes us pure, even though he knows and we know that we are not, so you still have to be on your toes. Now, it is my intention the next time I teach here to go into at length how the idea of God killing his son developed. This God can sometimes intervene in history and sometimes cannot, but we don't have anything to do with this. So this God loves some people some of the time, mostly, maybe. Mostly he's angry at sinners. God's like a Roman Empire. with that. God can do what he damn well pleases. And damning seems to be what pleases him a lot. This is the vision, or some version of it, that most people have of God. It is not the God of Jesus. Now, I want to be clear. There are people, C.S. Lewis would be among them, for example, who are very sophisticated, they're very smart, and they believe this, some version of this. And they have a way of rationalizing this. It makes sense to them. They can explain it. But you may notice that some features of this God contradict each other. For example, this God is unable to be influenced by people, but is angry at them. How can you be angry at somebody if they don't influence you? This God is both timeless and intervening. So I want to quote a theologian you've never heard of, Thomas Ord. He is what's called an open relational theologian. And this is what he says. Some conventional theologies accept the inconsistencies and appeal to mystery, saying that finite minds cannot understand an infinite God. This kind of mystery helps no one. In fact, it adds another problem, unintelligibility. We end up with a schizophrenic God who is timeless but intervening, angry but uninfluenced, and controlling but not around. Unimaginable. Now, how can you describe a God of love if this God behaves like a jerk? This God sends people to eternal torment, plays favorites, might choose to stop loving, lashes out in vengeance, allows rape, genocide, and torture. I'm not sure jerk is a strong enough word. Now, I believe that a very good case can be made using the scriptures of the three monotheistic religions, which would be Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, to make the primary description of God as being love. But there are other roads that lead to the same outcome. I mentioned to you last week, and it was in an offhanded remark, wasn't in the text, that a good test for judging the correctness, if that's the proper word, of the direction to follow in and through this uncharted territory of spirituality is resonance. Does it feel right to you? Does it make your soul vibrate? Do you say yes to that? So at the end of October, if all goes as planned, Ilia Delio is coming back here. Now, some of you remember when she was here before and my sharing with you the experience that I had with her when I first met her. It was one of profound resonance. To put it very briefly, Ilia said that the energy field in which we live and move and have our being is marked by four things. It is creative, it is evolving, it is entangled. And she said, and it's expanding, and she said, I don't know what words you use to describe God, but I would start with these. She said that her iconic image of God is that of a beggar standing at the soul's door. Now that's a highly Christian metaphor, where Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. So does love cause unnecessary pain? No. Does love send people to hell? No. You don't even have to be religious to believe that. But right now, I'm encouraging us to look at and to Jesus, because Jesus reveals God as one who loves and who lives nonviolently. Now, if this is true, what I just said, how did this God of love, allow someone with an assault rifle to go into a group of people having a good time together last Saturday night in Austin and kill as many people as he could? I have dear friends who are from Iran. As a matter of fact, we have a close, in this church, member who is right now, until I heard recently, maybe that's no longer true, with her 2 children and husband stranded in Abu Dhabi. Why did this God of love allow Donald Trump to start a war where the first casualties were a group of girls attending a school, 160 girls, who were among the first casualties of this obscene action? If God has the ability to do anything, why didn't God stop that? Now, we've ventured into a very special topic. The topic is called theodicy. Theodicy is made up of 2 Greek words meaning to judge God. How is it that a God of love can allow horrible things to happen? It's a very old topic, almost as old as the written word. But how can evil and suffering exist in a world governed by a good, loving, all-powerful God? And there have been untold theories, books, some of them worthy, some of them not, written on this subject. But as far as I know, there are 3 major schools that try to deal with this issue. One school is called the free will school, that says that freedom is considered such a great good that this allows the possibility for abuse. Parents, for example, love their children. They allow their children freedom, and through that freedom, children may make mistakes. Some of them tragic ones. Now, that does not explain things like earthquakes, hurricanes, and pandemics. Another school of theodicy is called the soul-making school, which says suffering and struggle create the conditions where virtues can develop: compassion, patience, faith, resilience. The problem with this is that I have seen some suffering that is so great, it serves no educational function whatsoever. And then there is the school of process theology that says that rather than exercising control over the universe, God works through persuasion, influence, creative lure, that the universe is an unfolding process. This is Pierre Desjardins' view. So God is more like a conductor of an orchestra that is guiding the orchestra of musicians, though they retain their freedom. The book of Job in the Hebrew scripture doesn't explain the problem of evil. Rather, it challenges the assumption that humans can ever understand it, which makes the book of Job the most fascinating, unsettling text in all of religious literature. Now, over the years, in seeking to do this, to be a spiritual teacher and to lead a spiritual life, I have heard, I cannot tell you how many explanations for suffering. Some of them have made me want to slap people who said them. But I restrain myself. A child dies in a tragic way. And some well-meaning minister said, well, God needed another angel in heaven's choir. That's the one that's right then. Or lines like, it's all part of God's plan. It's a mystery. We don't understand it. Or God wants to make you stronger. Or God's ways are not our ways. Or you just got to have faith, etc., etc. Everything happens for a reason. And really well-meaning people, usually frightened people, have said these senseless things. And I'm not questioning their motives. Some of them make partial sense, I suppose, but none satisfying. We need believable answers in the face of life's biggest questions. So, in the face of suffering and loss, some people turn to atheism. I understand that. This is probably the leading cause for atheism. God should have dealt me a better hand. So, beginning today and over the next several teachings, because the narrative we're following, it makes sense to do this. I'm going to continue to offer where I am currently with this matter. So the first thing that I would affirm today is that I believe in, behind, and throughout whatever is meant by the word God, there is relentless love. If there's no place where I can be, even in the cloud of unknowing, even in the depths of suffering, that God is not, and if the definition of God is love, then in all of that, no matter how I experience it, there is love. Based on my understanding of God through the life and teachings of Jesus, I believe that God loves everyone. Not just the Baptist. And I believe that God loves everyone all the time. I also believe that evil is real. And though I'm going to leave the topic of evil for a later time, evil from both our perspective and God's perspective is real. God can't prevent evil and tragedy. I did not just say God allows evil and tragedy. I said God cannot prevent evil and tragedy. At least not alone. A loving parent would not allow somebody to abuse their child. But a loving parent cannot always intervene to make sure that abuse does not occur. If a parent could do that and didn't, that parent is reprehensible. Same with God. I will repeat, God literally cannot unilaterally prevent some evils because the very nature of divine love makes coercive control impossible. God is perfectly loving, and love does not override the freedom or agency of other people. Love does not coerce. That's not a limitation. It's not a weakness. It's the nature of God. God is love. God simply cannot override human choices, and moral evil arises when people choose to misuse their freedom. Further, nature has its own genuine independence. So weather systems and earthquakes and viruses operate according to their own structures, and God does not suspend natural processes. Now, how we respond to these things, I think, makes all the difference. Years ago, there was a devastating hurricane that went across Florida. And the news cameras were doing their usual invasive thing of going around, sticking their mics in the faces of people to get their responses. How'd you feel about that? And standing in front of one woman, the home of one woman, a woman was sobbing, and she was saying to the camera, "We've lost everything. Everything we had is gone." A few minutes later, in front of a very similar scene, a mother was hugging her 2 children and saying, "We're so fortunate. I'm so grateful. We're still alive. I have my children." Same event, 2 different responses. I believe that the sacred is present in healing, in inspiring compassion, empowering resistance to injustice, and drawing the good out of tragedy. So imagine a brilliant surgeon. She has spent her entire life learning how to heal people. She knows exactly what must be done to save a particular patient's life, but the patient refuses the operation. The surgeon pleads with him, "Please, let me help you. I can save you." And she explains the procedure. She brings nurses in to reassure him. She shows him the scans, the test results. She speaks with compassion and urgency, but the patient still refuses. Now, imagine someone standing outside the hospital saying, if that surgeon were really powerful, she would just force the operation. But that's not how life works, nor is it how healing works, nor is it how freedom works. The surgeon cannot work by violating the patient. Healing requires cooperation. She can persuade, she can invite, she can warn, she can beg. But she cannot heal by overpowering the will of the person she loves and wants to save. So the tragedy that follows is not because the surgeon did not care. It's because love cannot be coercive. The power of God is not to control, but to never stop being creative, evolving, entangled, and expansive, no matter how broken the world becomes. Thy will be done. Now, what is that? God's will, as far as I can tell from the teaching of Jesus, is that we live with those 3 words that I swear I'm going to get you to memorize. Humility, justice, and peace. That's God's will. That we live that toward each other and toward the earth. And when we don't do that, there are consequences. Now, so what are the odds that during this month of March, something tragic is going to happen to one of you, one of us? They're pretty good. What are the odds that something we label good or wonderful will happen? They're pretty good too. Some of that we have no control over. Some of it we do. So we have to wake up to our own agency in bringing the qualities of humility, justice, and peace to be living realities in our lives. And we do this not out of duty, not out of obligation. We do it because that's our true nature. Listen carefully. The conscious person does nothing religiously. Not even religion. The religion of Jesus' day had gotten derailed from the religion of liberation and connection to God to being one of strict beliefs and practices that were apart from God. So knowledge and information The content of religion is important, and I would say it is vitally important. But knowledge and wisdom do not transform anyone's life. However, doing the will of God does. No matter where you go this week, no matter what happens, remember this: you carry precious cargo, so watch your step, and I will see you here next week. Thank you. Thank you.